Today, I'm going to be introducing you all to the concept of neuroforestry, which is a concept that I came up with to better understand and explore the creation of a more interdependent world that incorporates people of all neurotypes. Neuroforestry theory is a idea I came up with um, a couple months back. Me and a friend of mine who is not autistic, we were discussing various special interests, info dumping back and forth on each other, and we came up with this idea together. And it largely is an extension of the concept of neurodiversity as a whole. In fact, the word neurodiversity and the concept of neurodiversity is based on the concept of biodiversity. Biodiversity being the natural, healthy, and necessary variation of plants, animals, and other living creatures, and even abiotic factors in the creation and formation of a healthy ecosystem and ecocycle. In the same way, neuroforestry is highly necessary, and neurodiversity is highly necessary for a healthy neurosystem. And an ecosystem, if you think about it, has a number of biotic and abiotic factors. An ecosystem contains life, it contains death, it contains recycling and regeneration, it contains multiple parts working together, biotic and abiotic, that are all working together and that all have their own unique role in the broader system, and everything is supporting everything and everything is keeping everything alive and providing what every other thing needs. It's a cycle. It's a food chain. It's a nutrient cycle. It's a cycle of what life needs to exist, a constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. That is an ecosystem. Sadly, there are very few ecosystems remaining in this world, just as sadly, there are very few neurosystems that have been created in this world. Um, and an example of a healthy ecosystem, an example of an ecosystem which produces some of the highest biomass anywhere in the northern temperate zone of North America, and certainly anywhere in the extratropical world. An example of this place would be the Hoh Rainforest in Washington State. The Hoh Rainforest, if you don't know, is located inside of a U-shaped valley in the Olympic Mountains on the western side, which means that fog and currents and air and moisture from the Pacific Ocean blows into the Hoh Valley and becomes trapped in this broad valley, which thus gives rise to some of the tallest and most conspicuous trees on Earth, including but not limited to the Sitka spruce, the big leaf maple, the Douglas fir, and I believe, if I'm not wrong, the silver fir, as well as the western red cedar. All these trees and more are essential aspects of the Hoh rainforest, which is regarded as one of the cleanest areas in the entire world with the cleanest air. And on top of that, is regarded as perhaps the best example of preserved old growth temperate rainforest in the entire world. It's a beautiful place, and I highly encourage you to visit it. And the Hoh rainforest really teaches us as human beings an excellent example of nerd forestry. Um, because there's no one normal type of tree. Yes, the Sitka spruce is the predominant tree of the Hoh rainforest, just as neurotypical people are the predominant people of humanity. The Sitka spruce is the predominant tree, followed by the western red cedar, followed by the Douglas fir. I think it's in that order. And then you have other trees like um, the big leaf maple. And there's no one normal type of tree. Every single type of tree grows for a reason. There's no monoculture. In our modern societies today, we have a neurological monoculture. We have a status quo. We have a normal. We have benefits, services, and societal structures that are made for people who fit within that societally defined construct of normal. If you fit within there, then you are living in a system that works for you. If you do not fit within there, then tough luck. You are not fitting in a system that works for you. Such is not the case within the Hoh rainforest. You do not have one predominant type of tree, one predominant way of being, one predominant system that works for you but doesn't work for other people, or works for other people but doesn't work for you. The Hoh rainforest works for a big leaf maple as much as it works for a Sitka spruce, works for a Douglas fir as much as it works for a western red cedar. And not only that, it brings to mind the notion of interdependence. And I know a lot of emphasis has been put on the notion of autistic people living independently, the notion that autistic people are either high functioning or low functioning, and that living independently is the ideal. In fact, living independently is a fallacy. No one lives independently. There are people in our society who are neurotypical and able bodied. They are considered independent, but in reality, they are utilizing the systems and the services and the structures that society provides. Who built the roads that they drive on? Who built the homes that they live in? Who runs the jobs that they work at? Who grows the food and exports the food and sells the food that they eat? That's interdependence. It is interdependence. And then some people come along and other groups of people, because they are not able-bodied and they're not neurotypical, and then they're considered special needs. And in and of itself, that's not a bad term. It can be a helpful term at times, if you ask me. But it's not creating interdependence between all neurotypes and all abilities of body. And to add to that point, I'd say that independence is not the goal. Interdependence is the goal. Whether you're autistic or you're not autistic, whether you're neurotypical or you're not neurotypical, whether you're able-bodied or you're not able-bodied. Interdependence, not independence, is what we should be striving for. As well as we should not strive for a status quo. We should not strive for a monoculture. We should not strive for a society that controls people or that emphasizes only a certain group of people as normal and acceptable and tries to push everyone else who is not normal and acceptable into that box when in fact it is not natural to them and when it in fact hurts them. Additionally, what it brings out the idea that function labels do not really work. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, high functioning, low functioning," and it's a helpful term. In fact, it's not helpful because high functioning people are not inherently higher functioning. Their degree of functionality is not inherently higher than those who are considered low functioning. High functioning autistic people, to use that term, have more of the accommodations that society provides, are able to work within societal services and societal systems and existing ways of being, are able to exist within the status quo more so than low functioning people, are able to live independently, whereas low functioning people are not. Again, I'm not endorsing using those terms, I'm simply using these terms for explanation. High functioning people can live independently, low functioning people cannot live independently. Our culture, our society values independence, independence, independence. What really they're valuing is interdependence for a certain group of people, but it's called independence. And that brings to mind something that Temple Grandin said um, about the interdependence of neurotypes. She said that autistic and neurotypical people, people of different neurotypes, should say to each other, "What can I do for you and what can you do for me? Where are your strengths and where are my weaknesses, and how can you use your strengths to fill in my weaknesses? How can I use my strengths to fill in your weaknesses? What can I do for you and what can you do for me?" And that really just ties into the social model of disability. The social model of disability is a much more constructive and healthy way of talking about disability than the medical model. And you might not be familiar with either, and you might believe in the medical model and just not know it. The medical model of disability, which is the predominant way of thinking about disability, posits that disability is a deficit within the individual, is a problem within the individual, is something that needs to be cured, treated, or fixed in order for that individual's quality of life to increase or improve. The social model of disability says no. Disability is not something that is found within the individual. Having a minority neurotype, being not neurotypical, being not able-bodied is not automatically disabling. What is disabling is living in a society, living in a world that does not accommodate or understand your needs. For instance, let's say that I'm invited to a conference to speak about autism, and it's going to be very loud, and there's a lot of people touching each other, and there is just a lot of people in general, and there's a lot of and the convention center is very hard to navigate on your own if you have an executive function disability. Let's say I go there wearing headphones and I tell people in advance to not touch me, and I wear a headset with a microphone on it instead of holding a microphone so that I can stim while presenting my material. And I have an escort or a friend to take me in and out of the building. I might be uncomfortable, but I won't be disabled. The environment will not be disabling to me. I, at most, will be uncomfortable. There are many examples of the social model of disability, and I think that if we applied the social model of disability to understanding autism, we would really greatly better the future of autistic people. An example of applying the social model of disability to autistic people would be to say, okay, instead of saying autistic people with higher support needs cannot hold down a job, say autistic people with higher support needs cannot hold down jobs as they exist today. Jobs as they exist today are not constructed for autistic people with higher support needs, and that is why they cannot hold down jobs. It's not that they're inherently incapable. Other examples of the social model of disability include IQ tests. IQ tests are designed for neurotypical brains, and IQ tests are designed to observe the way neurotypical people express their intelligence. Since autistic people with fewer support needs have greater overlap with neurotypical people as autistic people with higher support needs, autistic people with fewer support needs score higher on IQ tests, score higher on average or above average intelligence. Those with higher support needs score as below average or intellectually disabled. The real issue is not that they're intellectually disabled. The real issue is that the way they express their intelligence is very different than the way that non-autistic people express their intelligence. It's very far removed from what society expects. And to add to that, I would say yes, there is an area of there is a place for the medical model of disability. There are absolutely places for the medical model of disability, and apraxia, or a lack of connection or difficulty connecting one's body or brain, difficulty making one's body and brain work together. That is apraxia. That is a medical disability. Because if it is treated, cured, or something like that, then the lives of apraxic individuals will greatly increase in quality. Such is not the case with autism. And so when you are apraxic, which is the primary reason why autistic people have higher support needs or are incapable of speech or something like that, the primary reason why autistic people maybe have higher support needs or are incapable of speech is because of apraxia. When you can't control your body or you struggle to control your body, obviously you're going to score poorly on an IQ test. Obviously, because you're struggling to control your very body. Now, how do you determine if something is a medical disability or a social disability? I would call it the principle or the razor of universal maladaptivity. Is this a bad thing in all situations? Is it bad in all situations? Is it disabling in all situations universally in every possible situation, even in theoretical situations? If the answer is yes, then it's a medical disability. If the answer is no, it's a social disability. For instance, autism is a social disability because theoretically, autism is not disabling in all situations. In fact, in many cultures, autism is seen as a strength and not as a weakness. In fact, if we were living in a world where the majority of inhabitants were autistic, non-autistic people would be disabled. Autistic people would be the ones who are enabled. And with apraxia, if everyone was apraxic, or if most people were apraxic, we would not be where we are today as a species because we'd still be just struggling to control our bodies. So you see, with apraxia, it is universally maladaptive in all situations, and the testimony of many apraxic individuals suggests that they do not want apraxia and that it is a struggle to live your life when your brain and body don't talk well to each other. Other examples of medical disabilities include disability caused by disease, such as disability caused by cancer. And in that case, the cure for the disability would not be to directly cure the disability itself, but to cure or prevent, ideally, the disease that causes the disability, such as degenerative brain diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia, or diseases of the body such as diabetes, cancer, and other things like that. So the medical model has its place, but in terms of accommodation in society, we should still look at those who suffer from medical disabilities. We should still accommodate them in the social model. We should still use the social model in the application of universal design and the designing of our societies to accommodate people who are medically disabled, who experience medical disabilities. And to add on to that, here's some examples of the social model of disability that I haven't mentioned. Um, is the example of Malpiailug. As I said earlier, uh, in many cultures, autism, dyslexia, other conditions and neurotypes are seen as strengths. They're not seen as weaknesses. Malpiailug was an autistic navigator from the island of Satawal in the current-day Federated States of Micronesia. Piailug used his autism to his advantage, his sensory sensitivity, his attention to detail, his ability to patternize and systemize, and his incredible hyperfixation, as well as his social clumsiness and awkwardness around people who did not share his neurotype. All of these allowed him to focus single-mindedly on his craft of navigation, and he was able to actually sail to Hawaii and Tahiti during his lifetime and become a hero of his people. Malpiailug was an excellent example of the social model of disability, not only because in his culture autistic traits were valuable for a certain reason, but because he was not living in a loud environment. His sensory sensitivity did not disable him. He was not living in an environment where it was loud and where his sensory sensitivity became a disability. He was not living in an environment where he had to focus on an assignment, on a school assignment, or work in a school system that did not fit his needs. He was able to pursue an interest that was not only a personal interest, but a duty in his culture. What if he was a student in a European or a North American school? He would have failed. And Satawali's culture is very much more independent than American culture. The premium is placed on the individual in American and European culture, in Western culture. Not so in Satawali's culture. And in mass societies, in large societies such as American culture, in monocultures such as modern day industrialized urban capitalist society, you have normal people and then you have weird people. You have us and then you have them. In Satawal, there are only about 250 or so people. People are just people. Malpiailug is just Malpiailug, or rather was. He's dead now. People are just people. There's no such thing as a normal person or a weird person. There's no such thing as us or them. People are people. He's him. She's her. Malpiailug was Malpiailug. No one cared about the fact that he was autistic. People cared about the fact that he was Mao. People cared about the fact that he did what he did. And that is why he is remembered to this day, almost 13 years after his death. And additionally, another thing to add is the double empathy gap, social and communicative differences in autistic people. So you see, the problem with autistic people is not that we have a social deficit or a communicative deficit, because if that were the case, we would not be able to communicate so effortlessly in between ourselves. Yet, autistic people have our own communicative norms, communicative behaviors, and communicative styles that we share amongst each other that neurotypical people do not share. Autistic people, and I'm reclaiming the term differently abled here, autistic people are differently abled than neurotypical people. That concludes my info dump on the issue of neuroforestry and the social model of disability. Thanks for watching.